Hey, folks, you caught us in mid-conversation. I'm here with the vice president of MPAC and a guest of Left Talk numerous times, Haris Tarin. Haris also was a senior official at the Department of Homeland Security. And we also have, for the first time ever, Tariq Habash. Tariq Habash is currently the co-founder and director of a new policy trying to change U.S. policy towards Israel and Palestine and make it more aligned with, our own laws when it comes to international law and human rights. But Tariq was also in the Department of Education in the Biden administration, and Tariq resigned from the Department of Education when we had a functional Department of Education over what he and so many others saw was Joe Biden's embrace of a genocidal policy, Israel's genocidal policy against Palestinians. The framing of today's conversation, and the reason why I really hope people are listening, even if you're not Muslim or Arab or Palestinian, if you care about, national security, if you care about international security. The framing is how Laura Loomer's bigotry, specifically her anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian bigotry, is threatening national security. Now, I've been trying to get Haris and Tariq on together for like 3 or 4 days. And folks, the timing of this, you can't make this up. Late last night, folks, Senator Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, arranged a routine visit to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He said it was nixed by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's office after a social media post by Laura Loomer. Can't make this shit up. That's the Washington Post. I'm literally reading underneath the headline. The headline is Mark Warner says spy agency visit canceled over post by Laura Loomer. Real quick, for folks who don't know, Laura Loomer is one of the most unhinged, unwell anti-Muslim bigots. She is one of the most notorious Islamophobes who was so racist that back in the day when Twitter was not owned by a Zig Heil-loving Nazi platforming Elon Musk, Twitter deplatformed her. And then she chained herself to the Twitter headquarters. Not making this shit up. That Laura Loomer has been invited to the White House to speak to Donald Trump at least twice, where based on her advice, Donald Trump fired members of his national security agency over the Signalgate debacle. She's been invited to the State Department. Based on her posts, Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, said, oh, yeah, our plan to bring in these Palestinian children temporarily to give them reprieve from a genocide, Laura Loomer doesn't want that. And then just last week, Haris will get into it, Laura Loomer tried to, in her own way, dox all these Palestinians and Muslims and Arab American civil servants, good men and women who are working in the U.S. government, and calling them jihadists and Islamists, and now they're getting death threats. So far, they haven't been removed, but it's only a matter of time. And this literally lays in our lap last night. So there's a lot to unpack. But Tariq, I'll go to you first because you've had an experience both with the Biden administration and now you're witnessing this as a co-founder of this policy. And a lot of people who might be saying, well, Waj, how does this all connect to bigotry and allowing the mainstreaming of anti-Palestinian and anti-Muslim bigotry? I yield the floor to you first.
No, you're exactly right. And this isn't something that just started over the last, few weeks or last couple months. This has really been systemic, dating back to the Biden administration when I was there as a Palestinian American working in the government, representing the Biden administration as a political appointee. The reality is that there is this exception for the humanity of people who look like me, who have, family background that is Palestinian, people who are Muslim, and the idea that there is this acceptance of this type of bigotry and racism and anti-Muslim hatred, like that's unacceptable, regardless of if it is Donald Trump and Laura Loomer or if it is Joe Biden and his administration. And I think it's really important that we recognize that the policies that we enable to break down the lives of real people around the world have real ramifications and consequences here at home as well. Because while the Biden administration started what we continue to see as now this unfolding genocide over the last 22 months, that also enabled this level of repression here at home and this type of bigotry and racism for Americans, regardless of where they lived. We saw a child in the early days of October 2023 being stabbed by his own landlord. We saw Palestinian college students get shot in the streets in Vermont over Thanksgiving. This has been a persistent type of like violence against the humanity of Palestinians, of Arabs, and of Muslims, and it's so important that we call it out. But it's really important to recognize the level of vitriol that we're seeing from the likes of Laura Loomer. Didn't
Oh yeah.
start with her, but we have to call it out and we have to be aggressively condemning of that reality because it is just getting less and less safe for people here in the United States, and it's certainly not getting better for Palestinians or Muslims in the broader region in the Middle East.
Billu agrees with you, and Billu, of course, has a mind of his own, so he's here to listen to you, Tariq. But we're going to talk about Loomer, and we're going to talk about this just these terrifying developments only in the past 7 months, where Laura Loomer, a complete crank, literally has the ear of the president, and he listens to her more so than his own national security experts on who to fire, on who to hire, and now also on immigration policy. But let's take the DeLorean, Haris, if we can, a little bit further. I want to really connect the dots because you saw the batshit Donald Trump press conference yesterday, where number one, he's attacking voting rights with the mail-in ballots, but he also said, "I'm going to unleash the National Guard against Chicago and ICE agents." And Harris, you and I were young men at the time, college students, student leaders, and we warned America about the war on terror. We warned America that by you all sanctioning this war on terror against Muslims, let's be honest, right? Clash of civilizations, the West versus Islam, Samuel Huntington, right? Mainstreaming and allowing of that bigotry to surveil Americans, to pass the Patriot Act, to create ICE. There was no ICE, folks, before 9/11. We kept warning that this military industrial complex that you have supercharged, that you have unleashed against, let's be honest, folks, Muslims and Arabs, both here and abroad, because yes, Muslims were surveilled here for no reason. This will be turned against United States citizens. This will be turned against white folks. This will be turned against Republicans, and this will threaten our national security and our freedoms and our liberties, and voila. So let's take that DeLorean back to connect it to where we are right now, Horace.
Well, thank you, Wajahad. It's good seeing you, Tariq. Let's be very frank here. 9/11 and the national security apparatus that was released after or unleashed after 9/11, our dilemma currently on the streets of Washington, D.C., Chicago, L.A. leads back to that. What we did after 9/11, unfortunately, was we said we are going to, regardless of the cost to our civil rights, civil liberties, our American values, our traditions of freedom of expression and of freedom of assembly, all of that, regardless of the impact on any of that, our so-called national security will take precedent over all of that. And when that happened, when we unleashed the national security apparatus, the DNI director, we created a director of national intelligence. We created a NCTC, National Counterterrorism Center. We created 17 national security agencies right after 9/11. All of those agencies then worked with local law enforcement agencies. So it wasn't only at the federal level. They worked with local and state law enforcement agencies to get militarized, to get further deep intelligence cooperation, analysis, and engagement with each other. They created fusion centers in 51 cities across the country. All of those now are being used by a president that is looking to exploit that power and that infrastructure. And I'll give you a really interesting example of how times change. I was actually in a conversation with President Obama. We were having an iftar dinner at the White House, and I was sitting next to him. And I asked him a very simple question because the American Muslim communities were dealing with this after 9/11, and even after he got elected, we were dealing with informants in mosques, informants
Right.
at hookah and shisha places, informants at Arabic restaurants and Middle Eastern restaurants and Palestinian restaurants. We felt that we had informants come to our mosques and talk about jihad and terrorism and all of that. So we were feeling it as a community. So I asked the president, I was sitting next to him and I said, Mr. President, this national security apparatus that's been built, that is in Tyson's Corner in Virginia, in unmarked buildings, how are you trying to steer this in a different direction? American lives and American freedoms and American liberties are being impacted by this. Organizations were closed down. We had multiple American Muslim Palestinian relief and development organizations shut down without any due process. And so I asked him this question. I said, "Are you doing anything? You were a constitutional law professor. You know what minority communities go through when the state surveillance apparatus goes after them. You know that it's a heavy apparatus. What are you doing to change this?" You know what the president told me? I was absolutely shocked. And, this is my younger me, maybe about 15 years ago. I was a little bit more naive in Washington. I had a lot more hope about, change and in the system. He told me, "You know what? This is like a ship that I'm unable to fully steer. And if I try to push too hard or steer too hard, this ship is going to there's going to be a wreckage on this ship, and I can't do that. All I can do is hope and pray that I steer just a little bit to move it along." Well, that didn't happen. We got a president after Obama who not only is steering that ship completely, it's a 180-degree turn, and is using it for his own personal army at this moment. Just yesterday, the DHS announced that they will now be reimbursing every local law enforcement agency that agrees to cooperate with ICE and trains local police officers to enforce immigration laws. Like,
Yeah.
listen to this: local police officers gets trained to enforce local immigration laws that ICE will cover their salary and their benefits. Now, imagine the level of cooperation that's going to take place, where law enforcement agencies are supposed to serve and to protect. I mean, when I was in school, we had a police car that would come to our middle school and high school, and we had a big sign there that said "Serve and Protect." That's no longer the case. If police agencies, if law enforcement agencies are now a tool of ICE and of the federal immigration enforcement system, all trust, whatever trust was left, is going to be completely eroded. So this goes back to a national security infrastructure. And Salama Mariati, our president, talks about this on a regular basis. We took national security and we perverted it. National security is no longer about protecting American citizens, keeping them safe. National security now is about weaponizing terrorism, is about political weaponization of your opponents, supporting the extreme Israeli lobby, and saying that we need to protect Israel's national security agency. And by the way, Waj, who are the people that train law enforcement agents?
I was gonna get there. You're talking about
Trains
cooperation,
law
and that's how I was
enforcement
gonna bring
agents
Tariq in there.
around the
Because
country.
because Tariq mentioned this, and we're going to connect the dots, folks, because you don't get a Laura Loomer without the United States of America embracing the war on terror. You don't get a Donald Trump, according to Spencer Ackerman, a journalist who wrote Reign of Terror. He said, without the war on terror and the mainstreaming of Islamophobia, you will not get a Donald Trump. And I'll make that connection. And I mentioned it. He did it in a high level. I did it in a personal level in my book here, Go Back to Where You Came From. But speaking about the cooperation, because Tariq, I remember, because I'm old, that Benjamin Netanyahu flew all the way from Israel and addressed America and addressed Congress and made the case for why the United States should join Israel in the war on terror. And also, he begged George W. Bush to also include Iran and bomb Iran in that axis of evil. Thankfully, George W. Bush did not pick that fight with Iran, but later Donald Trump did. Just a couple of months ago. But throughout this entire attack on our national security, as Haris Tarin said, using and weaponizing our own law enforcement now against us, so much of it was predicated upon going after the Palestinian extremists. And we were working and still work in concert with Netanyahu. So to a lot of people, they're like, what are you talking about, Watch? Tariq, how do you make that connection in that case?
Well, I mean, I think the connection is pretty clear, and we've seen it for decades. ICE has been training with the IDF for a really long time. I actually wrote about this in Newsweek back in July, right after Donald Trump invested tens of billions of dollars more into the ICE budget with his big, beautiful bill. This this entire infrastructure is bringing what the Israeli military does to Palestinians in the West Bank here to the United States. I think what I always say is what happens in Palestine never stays in Palestine. It comes here to our own home. And that is continuing. And we're seeing that in real time. I'm here in Washington, D.C. And when I walk outside every single day, I am witnessing ICE and our federalized police force here in the nation's capital abducting people off the streets in the same way that my own family and people who look like me back in Palestine get taken off the streets by the IDF simply because of their identity, simply because of what they look like. That's un-American. That is anti-freedom. That is anti-democratic. And that is exactly what Donald Trump is doing. So it's absolutely tied. It's absolutely connected. And as you said, Benjamin Netanyahu was making this call for years and years. This isn't just over the last few months. This isn't since October 7th. This has been an ongoing crusade of Benjamin Netanyahu and the far-right extremists of the current Israeli government to try and bring the U.S. further into war and to be able to politicize this bigotry against Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims. And it's really, really dangerous for our own American interests because it further destabilizes the region. It makes everyone in the region less safe, and it makes us look less democratic. It makes us look like we have ulterior motives that are actually not even our own. They're being driven by special interests here in Washington, D.C., by the Israel First lobby to get our politicians to provide this unconditional support to this war machine that is continuing to oppress innocent Palestinian civilian life. And when you see people like Laura Loomer get the literal ear of the president of the United States and telling the president, you have to fire this person. You have to stop allowing Palestinian children with injuries that need medical treatment from being brought to the United States to get that medical treatment. Those policies that Marco Rubio is signing off on at the State Department, that is literally being championed by Laura Loomer. And she's saying organizations that are providing humanitarian support should not be allowed to bring Palestinian civilians to get that treatment. That is so dangerous. It is absolutely un-American. And yet this is the policy of our national government. It's our federal government that is incorporating that into our laws. It is inhumane. It is dehumanizing our people further. And it's really, really dangerous for the future of what America looks like and what America stands for.
Folks, this is, for those who don't know this story, this was just 2 weeks ago where Laura Loomer, self-described Islamophobe, who is Jewish, but also is a white nationalist, let that sink in for a second, with very, very close ties to Donald Trump, campaigned very closely with him during the final campaign months, has somehow magically gone to private 30-minute meetings with Donald Trump, right? Who gets access to the State Department. She is the one who pressured Marco Rubio to pause visitor visas for Palestinian children in Gaza who were going to come here temporarily to seek medical care. So they had gotten the thumbs up. These Palestinian kids who were undergoing phase 5 starvation, genocide right now, like, thank God they were able to come to America on a temporary visa. And even the Trump administration said, okay, this is too much. You kids can come. And it was Laura Loomer just 2 weeks ago who used her social media platform to bully Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. And Marco Rubio, responding to that, Laura Loomer said, okay, yeah, we won't bring in these terrorists and jihadists. She was talking about kids. And Haris, talk to us about what Laura Loomer did a couple of days ago. You and some of your employees were masochists, and you watched her, I think, Twitch, where she literally picked every Muslim, Palestinian, Arab that is in the government and made the case that they're tried to make the case that they're extremists and literally did a witch hunt against them. It just fell out of the news. Go for it, Haris.
Well, let me take a step back before I talk about Laura Loomer, because if you look back at American history, this is nothing new. We make no mistake about it. We are in a new McCarthy era at this point. And for those of us who don't know, or for those of you who are too young and don't know about what Joseph McCarthy, a senator in the 1950s, did, was he decided that he was going to go on a witch hunt against what he called communists. And he thought that there was communist infiltrators in government, and in media, in Hollywood. And he was helped by the likes of Joseph Kraft, who was actually a journalist who wrote in the New York Times about communists, and he helped develop these lists that he would feed to Joseph McCarthy and essentially ruin their lives and the careers of thousands of civil servants, federal workers, folks in Hollywood, in media. And so this is a repeat of McCarthyism. McCarthyism died. Then in the 1970s, another thing happened, which actually we're suffering the repercussions of right now. In the 1970s, there was a movement trying to purge the State Department specifically of what they called "quote unquote" Arabists. And people like Joseph Kraft, what they did was they thought that the State Department and the employees and the subject matter experts, the diplomats who had spent their career learning new environments, learning the Arab world, learning Arabic language, developing relationships in the Arab world, they thought that these individuals were not pro-Israel enough. And what they wanted to do was purge the State Department of these Arabists. And they did that. They gave lists of hundreds of people who they thought were subverting the president's agenda, his specific agenda about getting closer to Israel, and that these Arabists knew too much about the Arab world and were too, quote unquote, nuanced about the Arab world.
So extremists like Tarik to your left with his long curly hair. Mashallah.
Right. Like these people like Tarik were too nuanced and they weren't pro-Israel enough and extremist enough on the Israeli issue. And they wanted to actually solve these problems and issues in the Middle East in a way through diplomacy, through engagement, through economic building of economic ties. They all got purged. And what was the result of that? The result of that was the Iran hostage crisis. The result of that was 2 Gulf Wars, right? Thousands of Americans' lives lost, trillions of dollars lost, millions of people in the region killed because we purged the State Department of quote unquote Arabists who were not pro-Israel enough. This was not the first time. Now we are going through another version of that. Laura Loomer.
Well, also, Haris, you skipped over it, but real quick,
Yeah.
this also happened during the Obama administration. And how it ties into Islamophobia real quick is that, folks, Donald Trump very deliberately spread the anti-Black and anti-Muslim rumor that that Obama was not a real American because he wasn't born in America and that he might be a Muslim. And also, folks, I want you to remember, because I keep the receipts, during the primary when it was Obama and Clinton, even Democrats said, well, I'll take him at his word that he's not Muslim. Remember that? And because he was Muslim was used as a slur. Muslim was used to make him look anti-American. Go look at the history books and the receipts, folks, 100%. Right? Donald Trump is the one who promoted the birther conspiracy. And in this racist country, after the first Black president, you get a white supremacist president. But also during the 8 years of Obama, the same type of purge that Haris is talking about, Islamophobes like Loomer and others said that the radical Muslim Brotherhood had taken over the White House, that the radical Muslim Brotherhood had infiltrated the State Department. And this witch hunt also spiked from 2018 to 2015. You had, anti-Sharia legislation, you had surveillance, you had all these hearings on the radicalization of Muslims, even though the number one domestic terror threat in this country is white supremacist terror and right-wing terrorism. So now you have that, and then now you have the latest iteration, Haris. I just wanted to connect the dot.
No, this is important because, I'm sure many of your listeners or viewers don't know about Steve Emerson. Steve Emerson was one of the original Islamophobes who did a lot of this purging. He FOIA'd the White House he FOIA'd my name to get every single time that I had actually entered the White House and had a meeting at the White House with some official. He came out with 28 meetings that I had over about a 3-year period. And he wrote a whole essay on how me as a proxy for the Muslim Brotherhood was trying to infiltrate and change policies for the with the Obama administration. That is the level that these folks go to try to purge people out of not just in government, but who are outside of government trying to help shape our policies. But Laura Loomer is just the latest manifestations of it. But the weird thing about Laura Loomer and the dangerous thing about Laura Loomer is she has the ear of the president and the cabinet. So Marco Rubio, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, she's got the ear of senior cabinet level officials. So she comes out with a list. Just last week, she came out with specific names of American Muslims, public servants, civil
We know these
servants.
people.
We know them. They're friends of ours, people that we know who've dedicated their lives to serving America, dedicated their lives to shaping better policies for America. Laura Loomer went after two specific American Muslim women at the State Department, calling them out, writing memos about them, sending them to Marco Rubio, sending them to the White House, sending them to the personnel office at the White House. And she's going to continue to do that. She's done that at the State Department. She's done that at the Department of Homeland Security. She will do that at the Department of Defense. She has the ear of the president, and so she will use it. She used it to get the first National Security Advisor, the NSA, dismissed, right? And she'll continue to do it. And her and people like, it's not just her. There's a congressman named Randy Fine.
Oh, yeah.
Pathetic congressman from Florida who is as vile and Islamophobic as you can get, who's called for the nuking of the citizens of Gaza, who's called for starving Gazan children, right? Who has asked the president to bomb Iran again. This vile person works closely with Laura Loomer to give these lists to congressional offices. And what else do they do? They connect all of these individuals, people like you and I, people like Tarik, myself, all other public servants who were in government. They call us proxies of the Muslim Brotherhood, right? It's the big, scary Muslim Brotherhood coming to get the U.S. Exactly. It's,
Look how scary Tarik is with the hunt track shirt and Haris with I don't trust Haris. Even though Haris is wearing a tie, I don't trust him.
Right, exactly. So now they're introducing anti-Muslim Brotherhood bills in Congress. So these got these so-called designation bills. Why are they doing that? They're not going after the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. They're not going after the Muslim Brotherhood in Tunisia or Morocco or places like that. They're doing that so they can then, by proxy, tie American Muslim, Palestinian American organizations to the so-called foreign terrorist organization and shut us down again like they did after 9/11. It is a strategy, folks. It is something that's worked for them previously. Guilt by association, because we're brown, because we're pro-Palestinian, because we want American interests to be put before Israeli interests. This is no America First movement. This is an Israel First movement, and all of them who are purging are doing it on behalf of the pro-Israeli lobby.
That's a bold statement. You said this is Israeli first movement. Tariq, I want to come to you because it's not just the Republicans. It's not just because, folks, the Biden administration, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'm an outsider. I wasn't in the administration. Tariq was in the administration. So I want his take on this. Without Biden and Trump's complicity, Israel could not continue its genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza. Now you're seeing some people within the Biden administration, like Jake Sullivan and Mike. Mike Millar? What's the guy's name? The State Department guy.
Matt Miller,
Matt
the
Miller. Who are
spokesperson.
trying. Yeah. Now they're like, but speaking about the purge, the one good thing about the Biden administration was they brought in, a diverse group of individuals who are well versed in these issues, people who come from these communities, a lot of Arabs, a lot of Muslims, right? And you would think they would rely upon their expertise before, engaging in a national security disaster which is the ongoing genocide in Israel, which also, as Tariq mentioned, has led to hate crimes, a spike in both Islamophobia, anti-Arab violence, and also anti-Semitism. And furthermore, has led to an erosion of supporters and voters from the Democratic Party. Furthermore, folks, I want to remind all of you, and going back to the point that Haris and Tariq have made, how when, the canaries in the coal mine were the Arabs and the Muslims, it's always been black people, and the rest of America says, they're the enemy of today. Go after the Irish in the 19th century. Go after them Italians. Go after the Eastern European Jews. Go after the Japanese Americans. go after the black people. Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians, all of them are axes of evil terrorists. Go after them. Let's create ICE. Let's create Patriot Act. Let's do surveillance, right? Let's go after these terrorist pro-Palestinian students. They're troublemakers. It won't connect, it won't come after us. So Tariq, you were in the administration and you were in the Biden administration. Talk
Yeah.
to us about how, and if you disagree with me, please, but how that led this, kind of planted the seeds for what we're witnessing right now.
It absolutely planted these seeds. And I want to come back to one thing that Haris said, because I think it was so insightful about like the level of racism that we see right now from Laura Loomer. And I need to just tie it back to what the Biden administration, what the president himself allowed and facilitated and enabled, and something that Democrats have not even been able to entirely push back against, even in 2025, as Laura Loomer is doing it. It's this level of racism against the entire group of people who identify as either Palestinian, as Arab, as Muslim. I want to be like the the point that like I always try not to lean into, because it's really frustrating that I have to even like clarify that my identity, like I descend from generations of Palestinian Christians, and yet
Mm,
like I get called an Islamist all the time because like I support Palestinian rights. I support US policies that value Palestinian lives as equal to any other group of people. And like I am as closely connected to the origins of Christianity as probably anyone else in the world. So it's just like this
mm,
idea that somehow it is so rooted in like deep racism and hatred of like Muslims and of Palestinians and just brown people generally. And it's so problematic. And we have to be able to fight that. But it also did not start with this administration. This was so pervasive in the Biden administration that, as you said, was so aggressively championing a diverse body of people who represented what America looks like. And I was really proud to be part of that. I wanted to be in a government that worked for the most vulnerable Americans and supported them however they needed support. I was in the Department of Education. I was focused on education policy, on student debt, and fixing a broken student loan system, creating opportunities for people based on creating like equal access to education, creating that racial equity component that I think we have seen really drive people away from our educational system, because it is really about like who has and who gets more and who does not have. And what I saw as soon as my identity became a problem, because I was willing to speak up about the importance of supporting Palestinian rights and the importance of protecting the integrity of our educational institutions, in the context of this growing repression from donors, from political politicians who are on the Hill calling our campus leaders to Congress and berating them about the idea that anyone could even support Palestinian humanity. This type of unwillingness by Democrats to fight back against that, the
mm,
unwillingness by Democrats today to entirely and holistically stand against what the Trump administration is doing with regard to these attacks on Muslim employees in the federal government. It's the Democratic Party's unwillingness to fight to ensure that Palestinian children can get access to critical medical care here in the United States, and their unwillingness to fight against the fact that the Israeli government continues to violate international law and our own laws here in the United States by using our tax dollars and our weapons. It is emblematic of the entirety of our failure as a Democratic Party to be able to withstand any sort of pressure and mount any sort of defense against this authoritarian regime that is now abducting people in all of our cities around the country, because that's what Donald Trump wants to do. But you can't fight authoritarianism if you have restrictions on your basic humanity and your basic ethics
mm,
and moral principles. And this is where the Democrats really need to decide. Do they want to just compromise? Do they just want to work with Donald Trump? Does Mayor Bowser in Washington, D.C., does she want to continue to extend the federal police force in perpetuity, as she just announced earlier this week? Or does she want to fight back, recognizing that that might risk things like home rule and her position as mayor? But you don't get to go from being the mayor fighting for DC statehood to being the mayor that is fighting for a perpetual federalized police force and get away with it as like, oh, this is normal standard operating procedures. We are not in normal times. We have to stand up for our most vulnerable people, whether it is here at home in Washington, D.C., whether it is across the country, whether it is vulnerable people in Gaza who are getting bombed and starved by our tax dollars and our weapons. We have to stand up for every single person.
Amen. And Tarik, I want to do a follow up on that, but what was the breaking point for you? Because you were in the Biden administration, you were in the Department of Education. Well, when we had a Department of Education, and you publicly resigned. For you, what was the point where you realized, you know what, this administration is not listening to the experts within the administration, it is not heeding our warning, and I can no longer be complicit in this?
Yeah, I had a lot of breaking points. I think the one that really did it for me, I was at the Department of Education. I didn't have control of, any of the foreign policy platform. I was trying to put any sort of pressure where I could. But at the end of the day, I was responsible for the education policies of the United States of America. And when I saw that there were young Palestinian men who were on break for Thanksgiving get shot in the streets, and our own government was unwilling to say anything after every single federal agency and cabinet secretary made a very clear condemning statement of October 7th as, rightfully so, war crimes are bad regardless of who commits them. But how are we going to be silent about the attempted murders of Palestinian children, one of whom was paralyzed when he was on break because he was speaking because he was speaking Arabic, because he was wearing a keffiyeh? That was absolutely beyond the pale, in my opinion. And after hearing excuse after excuse about why we had to support Israel's ultimate right to defend itself against civilians by bombing hospitals and killing journalists and starving children, that was absolutely the final straw for me, because these are kids that are in school. They are here, and we have an obligation to protect their lives, to protect their safety, provide them an opportunity to access their education. And the fact that we failed to do that, that is on us. And we are responsible for all of the results. We need to be held accountable for that. And I wasn't willing to stay another day without being able to speak out and criticizing our posture as the government of the United States, and failing to do so, and failing to protect our students and their ability to speak and criticize our own policies. And we're seeing the aftermath of that with Donald Trump's bribes of all these colleges and universities to force them into silence just because their students and their faculty and their staff desire some sort of critique, some sort of ability to criticize a foreign government. We're not even talking about this is common sense stuff. This is First Amendment stuff. This is the basic tenets of academic freedom of our college campuses that have existed longer than the United States of America. Harvard was around more than 100 years before the United States became a country. And the fact that we are willing to destroy the integrity of these institutions that are the basis of our democracy is a failure to the highest degree of what America stands for.
And folks, a lot of people who are watching, and not this audience, but many people say, "Well, why should I care about Palestinians? Why should I care about Arabs? Why should I care about Muslims? This isn't my fight, whatever." And you've seen Democrats ignore it, as Tariq said. They ignored the ongoing genocide. They ignored the human rights abuses in Israel. They ignored the Lord Loomer. They still haven't called out Randy Fine. They've called out Ilhan Omar more than they've called out Randy Fine. They've called out Zoran Mamdani, the guy who might become mayor, more than they've called out Randy Fine. They've criticized Rashida Tlaib more than they've asked for the censuring of Randy Fine, an outright bigot, right? I'm not making this up, folks. And then they were quiet when APAC and ADL were going after pro-Palestinian students like Mahmoud Khalil. I keep the receipts. They were quiet. Only a few of them spoke out, right? And then when it became a little bit more popular, then a few of them started speaking out more and more. Well, guess what, folks? First, they started with the pro-Palestinian students. Then they went after undocumented immigrants. And then they went after what? legal immigrants, and now they're going after everyone. That's how it starts. The war on terror. They pick on one group that is a marginalized group, and then they Trojan horse everything else, right? And Israel has said, "Oh, you're like me, America. You're against these terrorists. We're against these terrorists. We know how to fight terror." This is exact words of Benjamin Netanyahu. And now those apartheid, oppressive, authoritarian policies have now, if you will, been imported in America. Haris, um, the blind eye that Democrats, and the reason why I'm picking on Democrats here, folks, is of course we know Trump is terrible. We know Republicans are the worst because at least Democrats you can move them. But furthermore, Democrats say, Haaretz, we're from human rights, we're for peace. But when you're for human rights in a marginalized community, but you're also complicit with Israel and Islamophobia, how does that? And we're seeing it in real time with the dwindling poll numbers. But how does that shatter, if you will, a coalition? And how does that shatter a coalition that is needed to fight a fascist right now? Like, why is it all or nothing? Because I believe, like the Tariq, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter, man. I'm brown, he's brown. If you said he was Muslim, I would believe you. If you said I was Hindu, it would. Bigots don't care, right? They'll go after all of us. So, Haris.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves, Waj. The Democratic Party is going through upheaval internally right now. It is no longer, the Democratic Party could not remain the Democratic Party of Obama, the so-called Big Tent coalition, of the moderates of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, who try to cozy up to the big corporate donors, the pro-Israel donors, and really try to get their cues from the donors and then govern the party and govern the policy platform of the party through that engagement with the donor class, which is what they have been doing for the past decade, right? Since Donald Trump first came onto the scene, the Democratic Party has had one playbook, and that playbook is to say we're anti-Trump. Trump's the bad guy. He's authoritarian. Um, we really don't have any other message other than that. Like that's only what we have. And now that's coming back and haunting the Democrats because the
And
Democratic
also, shut up, Palestinians. Shut up, Democratic activists. Shut your
right.
mouth.
Shut your mouth. That's what they did to. I mean, let's remember it was really easy to have a Palestinian American speaker at the DNC, last year to actually address the concerns of the activists and the advocates on the ground, so that they can say at least we're willing to hear you out. They couldn't even put a Palestinian American speaker on stage for 2 minutes to address the issue of Gaza and what was happening in Gaza. I mean, they would have probably not even called it a genocide, but at least to give that platform to a Palestinian American to talk about it. They weren't even willing to do that because of the donor class. So the reckoning is happening now with the Democratic Party. And that reckoning is very clear. The Democratic Party used to stand for the average worker, for the poor, for the marginalized, for the minority, for the Latino, for the African American, for those who didn't have a place in corporate America, in the corporate establishment. When you asked civil rights activists and advocates who fought in the civil rights movement, who fought in the movement for disability rights, so many different movements, to make this country a better place, they'll tell you we were Democrats because the Democrats were for the little guy, for the one without a voice. Now the Democrats have become the corporate party at this moment. The majority of the leadership are corporate. But the reckoning is now happening because the majority of the party on the ground, the party activists, the party advocates, the party leaders at the state level, the party leaders at the local level, they are all pro-human rights. And they don't differentiate between Palestinian human rights and civil rights of Black and Latino communities in America. They see that struggle tied. They see the struggle of human rights, of civil rights, of an anti-war agenda, all tied, both the domestic and the foreign policy side. And we see this happening now in places like Maine, where the Democratic nominee in Maine, who's running against Susan Collins, what is his top three agenda platforms? That one of them is Gaza. He is talking about we want to keep our money in this country for our schools. We want to give young people, we want to give children in school the schools meals, we want healthcare, and we don't want our money to go to commit a genocide in Gaza.
Graham
You're seeing
Platten.
Correct. You're seeing that in Maine, you're seeing that in California, you're seeing that in Illinois, you're seeing it all around the country. And so the leadership now, Mehdi Hassan today, he wrote an article actually asking for Schumer and Jeffries to resign. But the leadership
Absolutely.
now has to reckon with this. Will they yield to the will of the activists and the advocates and the majority? Because the polls are also damning for the Democratic leadership. The polls, over 70% of Democrats have shifted their opinion on Gaza towards Palestinians and not towards the Israelis. The majority of Americans now, regardless of party, have shifted their opinion towards the Palestinian cause. So the reckoning is happening now, and the party leaders, the Schumers, the Jeffries, the donors, Ken Martin at the DNC, who's really struggling, he's trying. I've met with him multiple times. He's trying, he's struggling on this issue. They're going to have to make a decision. Are we going to listen to our base? Are we going to listen to our base? Or will we ignore our base at our own peril, and we will not win in 26? And we will not win in 28. Mark my words. Mark my words. If the Democrats don't listen to the base, and they don't listen to their base on the Palestinian and Gaza question, they will not win in 20. They will not win the House back in 26. And watch the candidates that come out against the genocide. They will actually do much better than those candidates who don't have the backbone to come out against the genocide. And the same will happen in 28. And in the 28 primary run for the Democrats, you will see a big upheaval, because there will be the establishment types who will not talk about Gaza, who will not talk about genocide, who will also not necessarily talk about authoritarianism, and those that do will come out on top, because it is now you can't stay quiet on this anymore.
Nope.
You're seeing in Congress. Sorry,
go ahead. Make your final point. Go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
I mean, you see it in Congress. Senator Bernie's joint resolution of disapproval that wanted to stop sending bombs to Israel. You had the first group of sponsors were 12. Now you're at 24. And so even the Senate is coming around, and the House is coming around.
27, yeah,
27 now. 27.
Yeah.
So I want to ask Tariq, final question to you.
Yeah.
And based off of just piggybacking off what Haris said, I've said, and I strongly believe this, Israel-Palestine is now a litmus test for Democrats. And it's not the litmus test like before that how much do you love AIPAC? How much do you love ADL? How much do you love Israel? It's, do you support an occupation? Do you support a genocide? Do you support sending aid and funding to Israel? Oh, you do? Peace out. And furthermore, we have seen that Allure Loomer, bringing it all together, folks. There's 1,300 people watching, which makes me so happy. Tariq and Haris, when I framed this conversation the way I did, I was like, I hope fellow Americans who are not Muslim, who are not Arab, who are not Arab, Christian, Palestinian, they would see how this is all connected. And so many of you do, right? You do not get Allure Loomer without the war on terror. You do not get Allure Loomer without the mainstreaming of Islamophobia. You do not get Allure Loomer or a Donald Trump without being complicit in Israel's genocide. You do not get any of this without our political and economic forces supporting anti-Palestinian bigotry, anti-Arab bigotry, and Islamophobia. And now we're seeing in real time, folks, how these freaks and cranks are literally harming our national security. The question I have for you, Tariq, is do you agree with me that this is a litmus test moving forward? And furthermore, what do you demand of this Democrats, the Democrats moving forward who claim to lead and who are claiming to be against fascism when it comes to Israel, when it comes to Palestine, and when it comes to Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian bigotry? And a final word for you, say what you want to say.
Absolutely. And listen, it is absolutely a litmus test, but it's not just a litmus test for Democrats. At the end of the day, this is a litmus test for America and American politicians, regardless of the political background, because, as Haris said, America knows. Growing up, my family, Palestinians who I would talk to, they would always say, if Americans only understood, if they only knew, if they saw what we experienced in terms of oppression, in terms of the occupation, in terms of the ethnic cleansing that my family was forcibly expelled through 76 years ago, if only Americans knew, then we would be in a very different place. Well, guess what? It's 2025 and Americans know. And we are in a situation where more Americans than ever are disgusted with US policy. It is absolutely a litmus test for our political infrastructure because Palestine is also the cutting edge issue on so many other things that Americans care about. We're spending money on bombing kids, on starving civilians. That money could be used to help people in our own communities. We're
Yeah.
seeing the police state that started in Palestine now come here to the United States. We're seeing the environmental injustice of bombing land and how that is destroying the environment. If you care about any issue, if you care about education and you're watching the scholasticide that is happening in Palestine that has prevented Palestinians in Gaza from studying for the last 2 years, if you care about any issue, you have to also care about Palestine. And so when you say, is this a litmus test? It absolutely is for Democrats and Republicans. And voters are watching. And this is why I started a new policy with my colleague Josh Paul, who left the State Department for the very same reason. It's because there is a political reckoning that is coming. And if you want to know who is going to be on the right side of this issue, who can actually overcome the politics, a new policies PAC, which is going to be directly supporting candidates, is going to be endorsing candidates. We're going to be rolling those out in the coming weeks, in the coming months. Go to our website, follow along, check in with us, get our newsletter, because we are building the political infrastructure to take on the likes of AIPAC and to be able to influence American politics at the most direct level, working with every single candidate, understanding what their positions are, working with members of Congress, helping them realize that actually you have one option if you want to keep your seat. And it is actually changing this position because this is your all-encompassing position. This is what Americans are going to use to decide if you have any integrity, if you are authentically a champion of education, of racial equity, of civil rights issues, of environment, of healthcare. If you care about any of those things, you don't get to be quiet or silent or passive about Palestine anymore. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to build that political power? It's all of us together. It's by influencing politics. It's about building something that will take on that political infrastructure so that Democrats and Republicans realize that they don't have a choice anymore. They have to listen to Americans because they get to be in their position at the will of the voters, at the will of the American people. You work for us, and now you have to listen to us. And so are they going to do that or not? Let's find out. But I think in 2026, and like you said, in 2028, and even in 2030, we are going to see a huge shift in the demographic. And we're already starting to see that, where people fundamentally realize that their positions have made it unviable for them to be able to stay in Congress, and people are retiring. They're announcing that they're not going to run again in 2026 because they realize that the uphill battle of having to actually work for real voters is too much for them in these positions that have been too cozy, too comfortable, that haven't actually demanded anything from them. Americans are demanding something from their elected officials now. They need them to listen. They need them to fight for them. And it's unfortunate that Democrats have been unwilling to do it. I hope that they realize that this is the moment that they start to speak out to align with the most vulnerable people in their communities and around the world.
Folks, this has been Tariq Habash of A New Policy. The organization is A New Policy, and I just put in the website, which is anewpolicy.org. And this has been Haris Tarin, Vice President of Muslim Public Affairs Council, also was a senior leader in the Department of Homeland Security. Tariq was in the Department of Education for the Biden administration, but then resigned over the Biden administration's complicity in the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And folks, bringing it back full circle and to end this, at the end of the day, I hope you all realize this is a human rights issue. Tariq is a Palestinian Christian. I am a son of Pakistani Muslim immigrants. Haris is an Afghan American refugee. We all care about these issues because we're human beings. I'm not Palestinian. Haris isn't Palestinian, but I care about Palestinian children because they're children. I'm not Afghan. I care about those Afghan refugees because they've gone through war and they deserve a home in America because they were promised a home and this country then betrayed them, right? I hope people care about what's happening to Indian Muslims because Modi is a fascist leader who was pretty much this close to also implementing his genocidal policy. I hope you care about black people because they are the backbone of this country, informally enslaved people who have been treated like shit forever, especially black women. I hope you care about legal immigrants like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, even though if you are a citizen, because this is a man who was picked off from the street, detained, kidnapped, and then tortured even after the Trump administration said, whoops, we made a mistake. And if they could go after Kilmar Abrego Garcia, if they could go after a Palestinian American student, if they could kidnap Rumeza Ozturk, a Turkish student, for writing an op-ed, well then, they can go after you, even if you're a cisgender, straight, Republican, conservative, white person who loves Taylor Swift. I want to remind all of you that Mike Pence, the whitest, most Christian man on earth, was running for his life on January 6th. Okay? Nobody is safe from fascists. Nobody is safe from fascists. And the fascism that we're seeing in Israel, the occupation, the apartheid, the genocide, you're seeing them work in tandem with authoritarians, wannabe authoritarians like Donald Trump. He used to love Modi, but Modi didn't want to give him the Nobel Peace Prize. Can't make this shit up, which is why he's pissed off at Modi now. But you're seeing the rise of fascists, Putin, Orban of Hungary, and they always pick on a marginalized community. Orban goes against the Muslims and the immigrants. Donald Trump goes against the Muslims and the Mexicans and the trans. Netanyahu goes against Palestinians and Muslims and Arabs. And this is why you're seeing a freak. I can't believe I had to say this. Never in my life I would have thought that Laura Loomer, a person that we've been following for years, a person who was such a freak that Twitter got rid of her, who's so racist that Marjorie Taylor Greene calls her racist. This is the person, an Islamophobe, an anti-Palestinian bigot, a pro-Israel zealot, a Jewish woman who's a white nationalist who has the ears of this current white supremacist administration. If they can go after Palestinians and undocumented and trans people, they will go after you. So I hope we were able to connect the dots. I thank you to the nearly 1,500 people who are watching us. This has been Haris Tarin and Tarik. Haris and Tarik, before I let you go, shamelessly promote yourself. Tarik, you first.
Just want to say thanks again, Waj. Follow a new policy, join our email list, contribute if you're able to. Be ready for all of the endorsements for members of Congress and for candidates that are going to be, ready to support a new policy, a new U.S. policy towards Palestine and towards Israel that actually prioritizes our American values for freedom, for justice, for equal rights. We are doing this work every single day here in Washington, D.C., and we can't do it without millions of people around the country who are fighting for these same exact values every single day. So really, thank you again for having me.
Haris.
Follow the Muslim Public Affairs Council, MPAC National, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can follow me on Substack. And as Tariq mentioned, please follow all of the good work of New Policy and make sure that you understand and you know which candidates that you should be supporting in the coming election.
Some good news. I'll end on this good news that just came out. I mean, look, Andrew Breitbart said that politics is downstream from culture. And anyone who's watched the Left Hook knows I'm really big into culture and storytelling and why it's so important to win over hearts and minds. I've said that Israel has lost the majority, looking at the poll numbers. Israel has lost the narrative. Israel has lost the youth. And Israel has lost the culture. News just came out from today. Variety. There's the Venice Film Festival. The voice of Hind Rajab. Hind Rajab, the 5-year-old Palestinian girl, Hind Rajab, who was killed in the early stages of Israel's war in Gaza. There's a movie called The Voice of Hind Rajab that premiered at the Venice Film Festival. It got, folks, the longest standing ovation. Average standing ovation of movies is 6 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. Frankenstein got 12 minutes. Tarik and Haris, guess how long was the standing ovation for Voice of Hind Rajab?
15 minutes?
I was going to say 14 minutes.
22 minutes.
Wow.
It kept going. It kept going amid tears. Wait for it. Folks, I got gray hair. Haris and I and Tarik have been in this for a long time. This is like, just trust us on this. This is big. 22-minute standing ovation. They kept clapping as they tried to clear the room to disperse. The lights were dimmed in the theater. The clapping continued. There were tears and Free Palestine chants at the
Wow.
Venice Film Festival
Wow.
for the movie The Voice of Hind Rajab, the 5-year-old girl among many girls and kids who were killed. So, folks, have faith. Have faith. Look, that's why I wanted to mention that. Have hope. We've been in this for a long time. People like me and Haris and Tariq, I was 21 years old during the war on terror. I marched. I was a vice president of a Muslim Student Association. I think Haris was his equivalent. Tariq, we were out in the streets. We tried our best. At that time, there was also the Second Intifada. If it didn't matter, they don't care if you're Muslim, Desi, Arab, Afghan. If you're in any way, shape, or form for Palestinians, we got called the same shit, Tariq, me, and Haris, right? Hamas, Hezbollah, prove you're moderate. I was on Canary Mission. I'm sure all you were too, Tariq and Haris, right? And we thought, man, in our lifetime, would it ever change? We don't know. But in the last 22 months, people have seen a genocide stream to their phones. And this remarkable shift that you have seen, folks, I've said it before, I'll say it again. In my lifetime, I've only said it once before. Obama term 1, Obama term 2 when it came to marriage equality. Obama term 1, gays, we like you, but gay marriage is gross. Obama term 2, gays, marry, we love you, because the culture changed and the youth changed. So, folks, pretty amazing news. Pretty amazing news. You take the wins where you can, but it's not enough. You have to end the genocide. You have to call out the humanity of the Palestinian people, Arab people, Muslim people. You have to call out the Islamophobes. You have to end the double standards. And folks, if you don't do it, we see how this has become weaponized for fascists to use against us here, against Hungarians, against Russians, against Indian Muslims, and against the Palestinians. Thank you, Tariq. Thank you, Haris. I kept you longer than I thought. There's 1,500 people watching. For the people who tuned in late, don't worry. This will be up later on my Substack. I'm talking to Tariq Habash. He was in the Department of Education in the Biden administration. He resigned, and he also resigned with Josh Paul. I think Josh was the first person to resign, right, Tariq?
Yeah.
And Josh ain't Arab or Muslim or Palestinian. He's a white dude, but he's pro-human. So they have created something called the New Policy, which is to literally create a new policy in the Middle East that is aligned with U.S. Values and human rights. And MPAC, we got you got an MPAC intern, Haris, doing your job. They came into the Substack. Muslim Public Affairs Council. He's the vice president, also was a senior leader in the Department of Homeland Security. We connect the dots, taking that. We took the DeLorean, not just to 9/11, folks. We took that DeLorean way back to the 70s to how we got here. Thanks all for joining us. Thank you, Tariq. Thank you, Haris. I'm a fool. I will keep working. And Haris, I'm going to be talking to our buddy Nafiz Ahmed in 2 minutes.
Nice.
Nafiz wrote a book called The Alt-Reich. The Alt-Reich. Yesterday, 2 days ago, I had Gil Duran talking about the Nerd Reich. Nafiz is a brilliant researcher and writer. He came out with this book called The Alt-Reich about, wait for it, the march of fascism both in America and in Europe, and how European fascists are using the anti-immigration and Islamophobia playbook to implement authoritarian rule. Huh? Who would have thought? It's all connected. Tariq, thank you. Haris, thank you.
Him. Say hi to him.
Yeah. 2 minutes. And folks who are watching, and then I got Danielle at 3:00. I got Mary Trump at 4:15, and I got Asha Rangappa at 5:15 because I'm a masochist. But it's all good work. Take care, everyone. Tariq and Haris, come back anytime.
Thanks.